Chapter 2. The girl stared, not at the fire, but above it, where orange sparks wisped into the night sky to join the stars. The soft crackle of burning wood and the comforting smell of flame reminded her of home, somewhere that now seemed like one of the distant galaxies floating in the blackness above. She always had an affinity of fire, though she had never quite learned how to make one. Her father tried to teach her, but her sister could do it easily. But the best she could manage was a faint thread of smoke. Now that the tendons in her fingers had loosened, she picked up another branch and laid it on the pile, then watched as the fire claimed it. "Has anyone told you that you're a delightful conversationalist?" the boy said, watching her through the fire with big, amused eyes. She didn't respond. "No, I expect you haven't." In the calm of the night, far from the border of the enchanted forest, the girl noticed something about her companion. The way only half his mouth smiled, the brightness in his eyes, and the sense of constant amusement about him. It all added up to someone who very much enjoyed being alive, and all because he had the good fortune to be born as himself. "You can finish with the wood now. There are bandits out there." He lifted a cast-iron skillet from the fire and slid two bubbling eggs into a pewter plate, which he handed to her. She shoved them into her mouth, so hungry she didn't even mind the quick scald as the yolks broke. With a chuckle and a shake of his head, he took a few more of the silk sack and cracked them into the pan. She had refused when he offered her clothes, but food she could not resist. "For your memoirs, my name is Rimitong of Bernato in the Western Kingdoms." She licked the yolk from her fingers. He sighed, though the grin never left his face. His attempts to draw her out of this far had ended all the way. She hadn't helped him clear brush or build a fire or even gather grass for his horses. She just watched in the mild suspicion as he worked. "Are there more like you?" she said. "Pardon?" He laughed. He looked at the fire in embarrassment. Her thoughts somehow seemed inferior next to the smooth polish of his words. His voice was deep and refined, and that too made her feel uncomfortable. "Are there more like me? Well, according to most girls I've met, no." When she did not oblige him with a laugh, he softened his demeanor. "What were you doing out here by yourself anyway? Enchanted forest and barefoot girls don't have particularly warm histories." She set her plate on the dirt and studied him. Could she trust him? She already had several times, and here she was alive and filling her belly. Perhaps he had earned the right to be trusted again. She reached into her tangled mass of webs, pulled out a rain-warped parchment and handed it to him. "I'm looking for her." He unfolded the parchment. It was a hand-painted notice depicting a girl in a golden dress standing before a castle in a heroic pose. In ornate script it read, "Pennyroyal Academy, seeking bold, courageous youth to become tomorrow's princesses and knights. Blood restrictions lifted. Come one, come all." "These bloody things are everywhere. They really are desperate, aren't they? It's not to say they wouldn't make a fine princess, only that they've never recruited this aggressively before." "So, you know her?" "I suppose you could say that. You're really quite lucky I came along to rescue you." "Hang on, you rescued me?" He fought away a smile, but was only partly successful. "We'll ride to Marburg together. I'm heading to the academy myself to train as a knight." She leapt to her feet, snatching a parchment from his hands. "You're a knight?" "No," he said, looking at his suddenly empty fingers, "which is why I'm enlisting. Look, you're not terribly gracious, are you?" She folded the parchment, scowling at him. He shook his head and took the skillet off the fire. He plated the eggs and prepared to eat. Then with a sigh offered his serving to her as well. Her mother had told her from her earliest memories to stay clear of knights, just as her father had warned her against witches. Remington, instead, he was a knight yet, but even the mention of his word made her nervous. She kept a suspicious eye on him as she took the offered eggs and sat back down. He stood and stretched, then walked to the street where his horse was tied and started unclasping something from the saddle. He was tall and lean, with effortless bearing of athlete who trusted his body to always do what he asked. And he intends to be a knight, she thought. I should have left him in that cage. I'm quite happy to see someone like you and listening, he said. The word is too unsubtle to be worried about the color of one's blood, don't you think? He brought back a small bedroll and tossed it on the dirt next to her. It's a bit damp, but the fire should sort that out. He collected the empty plates and set them in front of his horse to look clean, though she had already done a good job of that. Then he took off his doublet and laid it down on the other side of the fire, bunching it up beneath his head. We ride at first light. Try to get some sleep. Surrounded by the steady song of crickets, she had looked into the stars, confused and exhausted. Her eyes were raw. All she wanted to do was sleep. But now that she was even less certain whether she should trust him, she glanced into the depths of the black forest. Perhaps she should continue her journey alone. What if she finds us? She asked. She hadn't meant to actually speak the words, but there they were. Remington propped himself up on an elbow and looked over at her. I can't do that again. Her eyes, it was like she was looking inside me. His smile was gone. He looked as earnest as in the cage. That was a wood witch. They rarely leave the enchanted forest. Once we crossed that river, we were safe. Reverently speaking. She looked away, embarrassed by what she had said, but also comforted by his words. Within a few minutes, the crackle of the dying fire sent him to sleep, and she was alone again. She found a flat sandstone boulder and perched in the dark, thinking. But every thought invariably led straight back to that cottage. She was safe now, but didn't feel it. The fear echoed on. She slipped that necklace over her head and studied it under the faint light of the rising moon. A coat of dried mud covered its convex side. She had licked her thumb and rubbed it away. Underneath, a smear of dried black stained the scale from edge to edge, and something in that stain, a faint shiver, caught her eye. She tilted the scale to catch more moonlight, and it happened again. The stain itself seemed to be moving. She lifted the necklace higher to catch the moon's beams and realized it wasn't the illusion of movement. The stain was shimmering in the light like a vein of gold, and as she lowered it to her eye, it began to swirl and pulse, blackness moving faster and faster until she could see nothing else. Suddenly, she was plunging through the endless void. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't tell up from down. The disorientation was so intense she began to feel ill. Then, at the bottom of the sickening gray, an image came into focus. It was the shore of a vast sea, pink with a low sun. Someone stood there amidst the crashing waves and scavenging birds. It was Remington, and he held her face in his hand. You are the one true princess of Saudi. I will willingly give up my life to see it so. He gently pulled her closer. She parted her lips. Her stomach lurched, and everything went black again, but the spiral quickly settled into another image. A crumbling tower in the midst of endless forest, pelted with rain. A woman in a tunic dress of imperial violet in a great distress. Some unseen magic was forcing her to her knees, her eyes clenched in pain. The girl turned to find the source, and a monstrous witch loomed behind her, face obscured beneath the crowd cloak. She stood no less than 10 feet, and the sight of her filling the girl's heart with hopeless despair. A long, bony arm raised up, and the woman in violent scream. The girl wanted to go to her, but found she couldn't move. She could only watch the witch force the woman's head to the stone in a bow and force this. watch as the witch forced the woman's head to the stone, and a bough forced the cloaked witch thrust her gracious arms skyward, and through the air filled with witches, hundreds of them, black roads flapping dispatched to all the corners of the land. The girl tore the scale from her eye. Her breath came fast and shallow, a stark contrast to the boy's rhythmic snores. The peaceful thrum of the crickets. It took her a moment to realize that what she had seen wasn't real. Still, the overwhelming feeling of dread lingered. Another wolf's howl echoed from the distance, reminding her that even though she had escaped the enchanted forest, the bad things of the world lurked everywhere. She perched on the stone all through the night, watching the fire fade from orange to red to black. She tried to force her thoughts to her family, to her home, to anything but that monstrous witch and the unseen horrors lurking beneath that hood. Finally, the sky grayed to a dim, sleepy blue, and the girl remembered something else from her vision, not nearly as haunting, but equally as startling. She glanced at Remington, whose arms and legs sprawled everywhere like a giant had tossed him to his side. Why on earth would I want to kiss him? A sworn knight, or soon-to-be? What, no breakfast, no tea? What have you been doing all morning? She jerked her eyes away. She'd only been staring at him and couldn't say how long, but now he was awake. He sat up, his face slow and sleepy. She looked away again when she found her eyes resting comfortably on his lips. Remington made a quick work of camp, and they rode hard through the morning. Now that she need not to worry about the trees trying to kill her, the forest became monstrous, the ride quite exhausting. She clung to his waist, struggling to fight off the sleep that hadn't come the night before. As the sun rose behind the dim green canopy, the air grew thinner in her lungs. They had been climbing gradually throughout the morning, sometimes up long, slow inclines covered with bracken, other times along steep switchbacks of crumbling basalt or limestone. But nowhere on their journey had the pines cleared enough to give a sense of where they actually were. Finally, after a valiant fight, her eyes fell closed. She drifted for what could have been minutes or hours, never really sleeping, always aware of the crunch of leaves under the horse's hooves. "Ah, there she is, pretty as I left her," said Remington. The girl opened her eyes, but couldn't make sense of what lay before her. They were high in the forest country that ended abruptly at a sheer drop. Beyond that, the world fell away into a deep valley, feathered by millions of pine firs. A thin, crooked ridge formed a natural bridge to another mountain forest, splitting the valley in two. The horse stepped onto the narrow trail, but the girl didn't even notice the cliffs on either side of her, because there, at the far end of that ridge, an immense fortress of stone seemed to grow out to the mountain itself. Walls of bone white limestone, 40 feet tall, and marinated by walls of bone white limestone, 40 feet tall and marred by moss and water stains, encased towering spires with brilliant purple banners danced in the wind. Every surface was topped with battlements and jagged ridges of a dragon's back. Beyond the majestic kingdom, another sea of black-green forest rolled away to the ends of the world. "What's that?" she said, her voice dry and feeble. "Maryburg jewel of the mountain kingdoms." Eventually they reached the end of the trail. The horse stopped at a stony ledge that fell thousands of feet into an unseen bottom. Remington waved an arm, signaling sometimes at the gatehouse. A tremendous crack echoed across the twin valley, and an enormous wooden bridge began to lower across the chasm. Its timbers groaned under their own weight until it slammed onto the ground. This was how a mouse must feel in the home of a giant. The horse clopped onto the drawbridge. Now there was nothing beneath them but open sky, and after a very long drop, a sudden end. Two massive pine doors began to creak apart, broken shafts and narrow steel lodged broken shafts of arrows still lodged in them from foreign wars. A previously unknown part of the world opened before the girl's eyes. The kingdom, Merburg, he had called it, was alive. Ragged, clothed peasants crisscrossed the bustling streets. Merchants shouted prices and counter-offers. Mothers chased filthy children who chased even filthier pigs. Woodsmen hauled giant logs. Stonic guardsmen in glinting silver armor stood on watch, their spears piercing high into the air. Music poured from unseen windows, and the smells, burning wood and freshly cut grass and mud, flowers, and roasted duck. White plaster structures, lactated by the dark brown timbers, jutted on either side of the high street. Thatched roofed cottages squatted down near the mud. Everywhere she looked, the girl was keenly aware that she was missing a dozen other things. "Look at them," she cried. "They're just like me." They come upon a circle of peasants happily clapping around an elderly fiddler's song. 3 small girls dancing in the center of a coiffure, smiles and bare feet. Something about the innocent joy in their faces drew her attention more than anything else she had seen thus far. The fiddler kept a bulging eye on the girls as they giggled and spun around and around, faster and faster. He played, luring them into an impossible game, and soon their feet tingled and they ended up in the dirt, tears of laughter in their eyes. "Wait," said the girl, twisting to watch as they rode past. "Couldn't we stay, just for a bit?" "We're late. Stay if you like, but you'll miss your chance to become a princess." She watched the girls as long as she could until finally they disappeared from view. The happiness was so pure, it made her wistful and a bit melancholy. I was never that carefree. Remington renewed the horse down an alley in yet another timber-framed cottage, and almost immediately the joyous hustle and bustle of the high streets was gone. The sharp pungence of rotting things made her bury her nose in Remington's doublet as the horse clumped through the brackish puddles. The farther down the twisted alley went, the more clearly she could hear something up ahead, an ominous murmuring sound. "What is that?" "That, my dear, is about to be the strangest day of your life." Remington clicked his tongue, and the horse cantered up a slight grade of dirt. Finally, they emerged back into the sunlight. Across the vast courtyard of cobbled stone, there stood an imposing palace of polished black slate and mortar. Castle Marienburg. It loomed nobly over a temporary monarchy held aloft by 3 massive timbers. To the side, a line of carriage coaches waited, each hitched to a team of horses, and the sound the girl heard was combined with voices of hundreds of excited girls milling beneath their marquee. She went numb, unconsciously clutching Remington just a bit more tightly. The girls were all her age, each wearing an elegant dress of such variety, colors of the girl have never seen. All different, yet somehow essentially the same. "They're just like me," she thought, "only nothing like me at all." As Remington's horse crossed the courtyard, she began to notice that they had been noticed. Faces turned to them with unusual expressions, delight upon seeing Remington, then befuddlement when their eyes landed on her. The din of voices softened. She heard whisper his name, "Remington," circling through the crowd. His mud-splattered boots hit the stone with a soft thud. "Mind your dismount. Fall on your face before these girls and they'll never let you forget it." Alone on the horse's back, she realized that Nearly every eye in the courtyard was focused squarely on her. She began to go pale. She took his claw's hand and slid to the ground. First test beautifully passed. She tried to hide herself behind him, but after adjusting a strap on her saddle, he swung back atop the horse and left her along the cobblestones, alone in the crowd of hundreds. Right, I'm off to the knight's establishment. Wait, she said. What do I do? He pointed to the shade beneath the marquee beyond the colorful dresses of several long wooden tables. You march straight over there and enlist. You have as much right to be here as anyone. She looked up at him with eyes full of fear. Take me home. I don't want to be here anymore, she thought, but no words came. Bravely ventured is half won, as my father likes to say. The only way to find a girl on your parchment is through that lot. He nodded to the crowd, not all surprised by the attention coming his way. Off, he said, rearing the horse onto his hind legs and dramatically whining, then rode away across the courtyard, leaving a ripple of awed gasps in his wake.